My name is Alex, I'm 28, and I live about an hour outside the city in a quiet suburb, which is honestly exactly how I like it because I've never been a city person. Too much noise, too many people, and definitely too many sketchy apartment buildings with thin walls and weird neighbors. Anyway, back in October, my friend Marcus asked me to watch his cat for 3 days while he visited his sick mom in Pennsylvania. Marcus and I went to college together, and even though we don't see each other much anymore, we're still close, and he was really in a bind because all the pet boarding places near him were booked up for some reason. So I agreed to stay at his apartment for the long weekend and take care of Pepper, his black cat who I'd only met once before. Marcus warned me that Pepper was kind of weird and didn't like strangers much, but he said she'd warm up to me eventually. And honestly, how hard could it be to feed a cat and scoop a litter box for 3 days, right? I packed a bag and drove into the city on a Friday afternoon. Marcus met me at his place, showed me where everything was, and then took off in an Uber to the airport. The apartment was on the 4th floor of this old building in a neighborhood I wasn't familiar with. It wasn't a bad area exactly, but it felt off in a way I couldn't put my finger on. The hallway had this dim yellowish lighting and there were only 2 other apartments on the floor, and I never saw anyone come or go from either of them. The first night was fine. Pepper ignored me completely, and I just ordered food, watched Netflix on Marcus's couch, and went to bed around 11 in his guest room. The second day, Saturday, was when things started feeling weird. Pepper, who had been avoiding me, suddenly became obsessed with the front door of the apartment. She would sit about 5 feet away from it and just stare at it for hours. Occasionally she'd hiss at absolutely nothing, and her tail would puff up like she was scared or angry. I thought maybe she heard someone in the hallway or smelled another animal or something like that, so I didn't think too much of it at first, but it kept happening all day long and into the evening. I texted Marcus about it and he said Pepper sometimes acted strange, but she'd never done that specific behavior before. He told me not to worry about it and that cats are just weird sometimes, which honestly didn't make me feel any better, but I tried to ignore it. So I made myself dinner and settled in to watch a movie, but I kept glancing over at Pepper, still sitting there, staring at the door. It was starting to creep me out. Around midnight, I was getting ready for bed when I heard this soft sliding sound against the bottom of the door, like paper scraping across wood. I walked over and saw a folded piece of notebook paper that had been slid under the door from the hallway side. Pepper hissed loudly and backed away, and my hands started shaking before I even picked it up. I unfolded the note, and it said in blocky handwritten letters, "I know you're not supposed to be here." My first thought was that this was some kind of prank, or maybe Marcus had arranged it as a joke, but that didn't make sense because he didn't have that kind of sense of humor. And also, who would he have gotten to do it? I stood there holding the note, trying to figure out what to do. My phone was in the other room charging and I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? Someone slid a vague, threatening note under my door? They'd probably think I was paranoid or wasting their time. Then I heard the doorknob start to turn, slowly, making this metal grinding sound as it rotated left and right, like someone was testing to see if it was locked. Thank God I had locked the deadbolt when I came back from getting food earlier that day. The doorknob kept turning, and the metal bolt rattled against the strike plate for what felt like forever but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds, and then it stopped. I backed away from the door and just stared at it, waiting for something else to happen. Pepper was hiding under the couch, now making these low growling sounds I'd never heard a cat make before. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife from the drawer, then got my phone from the guest room, and went into Marcus's bedroom, which was the farthest room from the front door, and locked myself in. I called Marcus, but it went straight to voicemail. His mom lived in a rural area with bad cell service, so that wasn't surprising. I spent the rest of the night sitting on his bed with the knife next to me, checking the Ring doorbell app he had on his phone that he'd let me log into. The camera showed the empty hallway outside his door. Nothing. No one. I left first thing in the morning and texted Marcus that I had a family emergency and couldn't stay the rest of the weekend. I found a neighbor kid to go feed Pepper and left money on the counter. I never told Marcus what really happened, and he never mentioned finding the note, so maybe whoever it was took it back, or maybe I'm just being paranoid. The thing is, I looked up his building later and found out that the previous tenant of his apartment had been evicted for subletting it illegally to like 5 different people at once. So I don't know if it was one of those old subletters who still had a key, or someone who thought I was squatting there, or what. But I swear I'm never staying in that apartment again. This story happened in November of 2017 at my uncle's cabin up in northern Minnesota. My parents asked me to go winterize the place before the real snow hit because my uncle was dealing with health issues and couldn't make the trip himself. I figured it would be easy money. Plus, I could use a weekend away from everything, so I drove up on a Friday afternoon. The cabin sits about a half-mile from the nearest neighbor, and the lake was already starting to freeze over. That gray, slushy ice that looks depressing as hell. I got there around 4 p.m., and it was already getting dark, which happens early up there in November. I unloaded my stuff and started working on draining the pipes and shutting off the water heater. Basic winterizing stuff. My uncle had left me a list. I was planning to stay 2 nights to make sure everything was done right. And honestly, the first night was fine. I made dinner, heated up some canned soup, watched a movie on my laptop, then went to bed around 11. The cabin only has 2 bedrooms, and I slept in the main one that faces the lake. The next morning, I woke up around 8 and went outside to check the propane tank. That's when I saw them. Footprints. In the snow, leading from the tree line straight to the cabin. They went right up to the side of the house, near the crawl space access door. And then they just stopped. There were no footprints leading away. I stood there staring at them for a while, trying to make sense of it. The snow had fallen during the night, so these prints were fresh, maybe only a few hours old. I walked around the whole cabin twice, looking for where the person left. But there was nothing. Just those prints going to the crawl space door, and that was it. I checked the door, and it was still latched from the outside. So I figured maybe they turned around and walked backwards in their own prints to hide their trail. People do that, right? When they're hunting or whatever. I convinced myself that's what happened, because the alternative didn't make any sense. I went back inside and tried to finish the winterizing checklist, but I couldn't focus. I kept looking out the windows at those footprints. Around noon, I went back outside with a flashlight and opened the crawl space door. I shined the light around in there, but it's a big space and the light only reached so far. I could see the dirt floor and some old boxes and the support beams, but that was it. I called out, "Hello," like an idiot, and of course there was no answer, so I closed it back up and latched it. That afternoon, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I should have just left right then, but I only had a few more things to do on the list, and I didn't want to tell my parents I bailed on the job because of some footprints. Plus, my phone only had 1 bar of service up there, and the battery was at like 15% because I forgot my charger. I told myself I'd finish everything and leave first thing in the morning. When it started getting dark, I made sure every door and window was locked. I even pushed a chair under the front doorknob. I tried to act normal, made dinner and sat in the living room. But I couldn't watch a movie or anything, I just sat there, listening. The cabin makes all these settling noises anyway, the wood creaking and the wind against the windows, but I was listening for something else. Around 10 p.m. I heard it. A soft scraping sound, coming from below the floor. I froze and held my breath. The scraping continued, slow and deliberate, like something being dragged across dirt. Then I heard what sounded like someone coughing, a wet, raspy cough. That came from directly under the living room. I grabbed my uncle's flashlight and the tire iron from my car, and I didn't move from the couch. I just sat there with the tire iron across my lap, waiting. The sound stopped for maybe 20 minutes, and I started to think I imagined it. That was until I heard the crawl space door rattle. Someone was trying to open it from the inside. I could hear the metal latch jiggling, and then a harder shove against the wood. The door was old, and I don't think the latch would hold if someone really pushed. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find, then went back to the living room and waited. The rattling stopped. Everything went quiet. I sat there until almost 3 a.m. before I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. I passed out on the couch with the tire iron still in my hands. When I woke up, it was just starting to get light outside. Around 6:30 a.m., I immediately grabbed my stuff, threw it in the car, and got the hell out of there. I didn't check the crawl space again. I didn't finish winterizing. I just left. As soon as I got service, I called my dad and told him I finished everything, but that I had to leave early for work. which was a lie. My parents ended up hiring someone to finish the job a week later. When I asked my dad if the guy mentioned anything weird, he said no, everything was normal. I still don't know what to make of it. Sometimes I think maybe I was just freaked out over nothing and the footprints had some explanation I'm not thinking of. But then I remember that coughing sound, and the way the crawl space door rattled from the inside, and I know something was down there. I was alone in that cabin with something, or someone, underneath me. And I have no idea what they wanted, or if they're still there. My uncle sold the property last year, and I never told him why I didn't finish the job. I think about the new owners sometimes, and wonder if they've heard anything at night. My girlfriend Emma and I were house-sitting for the Hendersons in their gated community outside of Charlotte. This was back in March of 2019. They were some kind of tech executives who traveled constantly for work. And honestly, their place was ridiculous, like something out of a magazine. 3 floors, all glass and steel, with a pool and one of those fancy home automation systems where everything connects to an app on your phone. We'd done this for them twice before, and it was always easy money. We'd water the plants, feed their 2 cats, and basically just live like rich people for a week while they were in Dubai or Singapore or wherever. The neighborhood itself was called Meadowbrook Estates, which is a stupid name because there's no meadows and definitely no brooks. Just identical modern houses with perfect lawns and a gate guard named Russell, who waves at everyone. So the Hendersons left on a Thursday and gave us the usual instructions about the alarm code, the thermostat, the works. They also mentioned their new Ring doorbell camera, which they were pretty excited about. I guess it sends alerts to your phone whenever someone approaches the front door and you can see who it is and talk to them through the speaker. We didn't think much of it at the time. Everything was normal for the first couple nights. We ordered pizza, watched movies in their home theater room with the massive sectional couch. Emma kept joking about how we should just move in permanently. On Saturday night, we went to bed around midnight in their master bedroom, which feels weird, but they insist we use it instead of the guest room. I'm a pretty heavy sleeper, but Emma wakes up at everything. It was sometime after 3 a.m. when Emma shook me awake and whispered, "There's someone at the door." I was pretty out of it and I asked her what she meant. She said the doorbell app just went off on her phone. She showed me the notification. Front door, motion detected, with a timestamp of 3:17 a.m. I told her it's probably just a cat or something, but she opened the app anyway, and we both stared at the live feed of the front porch under the motion sensor lights. There was nobody there, just the empty porch and the driveway beyond it. We waited for like a minute watching the screen, and then the doorbell rang. We could hear it echo through the house, that 2-tone chime. And on Emma's phone, we watched the camera view, but still, nothing. No person, no animal, just empty concrete. I started to think maybe it was malfunctioning. Emma said we should check the recording. The app keeps a log of all the motion events. So we scrolled back and watched the clip from a few minutes earlier. The video showed the porch completely still, and then at exactly 3:17, the camera seemed to glitch for half a second. And then the motion alert triggered, but there was definitely nobody there. I told Emma it's just a bug in the system. These smart home things mess up all the time. She didn't look convinced, but we eventually went back to sleep. I made sure to lock the bedroom door though, which I hadn't done the previous nights, just in case. The next morning I went downstairs to make coffee, and that's when I saw the package, sitting on the front porch. It was a medium-sized cardboard box just sitting there next to the doormat. I opened the front door and brought it inside. The label said it was addressed to someone named Marcus Venter. At this address, 4425 Brookstone Lane, which was the Hendersons' address, but they're David and Caroline Henderson. I'd never heard them mention anyone named Marcus. I texted a photo of the label to Caroline and asked if they were expecting anything for someone else. She replied pretty quick, saying no idea. Probably a delivery mistake. Just leave it. We'll deal with it when we get back. That night around 2 a.m., Emma's phone went off again with the doorbell alert. We were both awake this time, scrolling on our phones before bed. We pulled up the camera feed at the same time. Nothing there again, just the porch. But then the doorbell rang 3 times in a row. Ding dong. Ding dong. Ding dong. We could hear it downstairs echoing up to the bedroom. My heart was going pretty fast now, and I told Emma I'm going to go check it out. She said absolutely not, but I grabbed my phone and one of the Hendersons' golf clubs from the hallway closet and went downstairs anyway. I turned on every light as I went. The living room, the kitchen, the entryway. I looked through the peephole in the front door and saw nothing.
I opened the Ring app on my phone and rewound to watch what triggered the alert.
Again, the footage showed the same glitch, that half-second distortion, and then the motion detection kicking in. But no person at all. I stood there in the entryway for probably 10 minutes just listening. The house was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the air conditioning. When I finally went back upstairs, Emma asked what I saw, and I told her nothing. She asked if I checked outside for footprints or anything, and honestly, I hadn't thought of that. We didn't go back to sleep that night. We just sat there in bed with the TV on low volume, waiting for it to happen again. But it didn't. The next morning, there were 2 more packages on the porch, one addressed to Marcus Venter again, and another one to someone named Diane Cho. I brought them inside and stacked them in the entryway with the first one. I tried Googling both names with the address, but nothing came up. Caroline texted me that morning asking how things were going. I almost told her about the doorbell thing, but I didn't want to sound crazy or paranoid. I just said everything's fine. That afternoon, I drove to the gate and asked Russell the guard if he'd seen anyone entering the neighborhood late at night. He said no. Why? I told him we've been getting some weird doorbell activity, and he kind of laughed and said, yeah, those Ring cameras go off all the time. Bugs and stuff set them off. I asked if he keeps a log of cars coming in and out, and he said, yeah, on the computer, but he can't share that information with residents, only homeowners. I didn't push it. On Tuesday night, the doorbell alerts started happening every hour, starting at 1 a.m., then 2 a.m., then 3 a.m. Each time the camera showed nothing. Each time we'd hear that chime echo through the house. Emma wanted to disable the doorbell entirely, but I said the Hendersons would notice and ask questions. By 4 a.m., we were both exhausted and freaked out. I went downstairs again with the golf club, and this time I opened the front door and actually stepped outside onto the porch. The motion lights were on. The street was completely empty and quiet. I looked down. And there were 3 more packages, stacked neatly next to the door, all with different names. None of them Henderson. I grabbed them and brought them inside, and that's when I noticed something. The top package was heavier than the others. I shook it gently and heard something shift inside. Not like a normal product, but something loose and multiple pieces. Emma came downstairs and I showed her. She said we should open it. I said we can't. It's not ours. She said it's not anyone's. These people don't exist. We didn't open it, but we moved all 6 packages into the garage instead of leaving them in the entryway. I don't really know why. It just felt better to have them out of sight. The Hendersons were supposed to be back on Friday, which was still 3 days away. We talked about leaving early, but we'd already committed, and honestly, I felt stupid explaining that we were scared of a malfunctioning doorbell. The alerts kept coming, every night, always between 1 and 4 a.m., always with the same glitchy footage, always with nothing visible on camera. And every morning there'd be more packages. By Thursday morning, there were 11 of them stacked in the garage. I stopped bringing them inside after that. I just left them on the porch. We haven't house sat for the Hendersons since. They got back on Friday, and I texted Caroline to let her know we were heading out. She asked if everything went okay, and I just said, yeah, all good. I didn't mention the doorbell or the packages. I don't know if they ever figured out what was going on, or if it stopped after we left. I do know that about 2 months later, the Hendersons sold that house and moved. I saw it listed online and then marked as sold. Emma thinks maybe they knew something was wrong with the place, and that's why they kept traveling so much. I don't know what to think, honestly. But I still get anxious whenever I hear a doorbell chime. Even during the day, even at my own apartment. And I've never used a Ring camera since.